Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at the Timbren Suspension Enhancement System for the rear axle on a 2022 Chevy Silverado 1500. Adding rear suspension helper springs is really a great option because your factory jounce bumper is pretty short, and a lot of that comes down to people are daily driving their trucks more and more, so manufacturers are kind of making them a little bit more comfortable. And that way, when you're daily driving, you're not getting that harsh suspension. But with that, sometimes the suspension squats quite a bit, and partially, I think, is because the jounce bumpers take so long to engage, and by the time they do engage, that suspension's really lost a lot of its travel, whereas adding these are going to kind of give it a fighting chance. It's not going to be able to squish down all the way, and that's going to allow those shocks to have more compression as you hit bumps. It's also going to engage a lot quicker, so it's going to take some of those harsh bumps out, and also when you're loaded down, it's going to fight against that as you add that weight, and it's going to make your towing experience that much better. Now, these are made out of AON rubber, which is really nice because it is progressive. So you can see this design allows for when it engages, it's going to take that blow. It's just going to kind of soften all of that by this nice rubber that is going to absorb a lot. But as you add that weight, this is going to squish and really fight against that, giving your suspension that added support to really handle that load. Now, these can handle a lot of weight, and that's not to say that it's going to add that capacity to your truck. It's what they can handle, but that should be more than enough for anything you might throw in the bed or even a heavy tongue weight. So the main thing that you get with this is a better driving experience, but there's a bunch of different reasons. You're going to help your suspension not get worn out, but you're also going to get more steering feel. It's going to allow that vehicle to kind of stabilize out, putting pressure on the front tires a little more, and that way you get your steering back instead of that loose kind of squirrely handling feeling. You're also going to get better braking with that. Your headlight height also, as your truck is squatted, aims up, it's going to stabilize that back as well. Another added feature too, on a solid axle, you don't really have, sway bars here, you have your leaf springs, but this is going to help fight against sway because it's going to engage pretty quick, allowing that axle to kind of stabilize, level with the truck. So it's going to make handling just better overall, even without a load on there. I do think these are a better option than airbags a lot of times. Airbags are nice because you have adjustability, but overall, the maintenance with it and running airlines is a little more than you need because this just drops into that factory spot. You can have this done in about 15 minutes, and you're going to have a noticeable difference for the lifetime of your truck, and you don't have to worry about maintaining it. It's just going to work every time you use it. Now, we've gone ahead and loaded up a tote in the rear of the bed, and this is filled with water. It probably weighs about 1,500 pounds, and it's sitting right on over the axle of the truck, and you can see the squat is obviously pretty apparent. So we're going to take it out on the test course and see how it handles. So we've gone ahead and loaded up a tote in the back of the truck that's filled with water, and it's a decent amount of weight, and it was super noticeable as we loaded it in with the forklift that the truck was squatting quite a bit. So on our test course, we're going to hit some bumps and just kind of do some parking lot driving to see how it's actually going to affect it. And honestly, the truck rides pretty good, I'll admit that. It definitely feels like there's weight in the back because there is. The front, the steering is a little bit squirrelier just because you don't have that contact patch. It's kind of just tilting the truck back. And the rear definitely is kind of has a sagging feeling to it. It just kind of feels like it's lugging behind. But overall, I mean, the truck's doing a fine job, but also the suspension's going to be getting a workout. You're not getting that movement of the shocks because it's going to be compressed. And so that's really going to make for a rougher ride. And right now, as I'm hitting just small bumps, I do kind of notice the truck just kind of feels like it's getting tugged from behind, almost like I'm pulling a trailer, and that's just weight in the bed. So hopefully our rear suspension enhancement should really bump that back up, give our suspension a fighting chance, and just be able to allow the truck to support that weight a little bit more. I'm going to do a quick slalom, just kind of side to side, just to kind of really stress the suspension from one side to the other, kind of put that weight on it. And it does, like I said, the steering feel is a little bit more numb than when it was when it didn't have weight in it, and that's kind of to be expected. But that's something that I've noticed when putting rear suspension enhancement in, is you really gain that back, and that overall will just give you a better driving experience. So now that we've gone ahead and driven it with weight in the back on the stock jounce bumpers, we're going to pull it in, we'll get our Timbrens installed, and we really should notice a difference. Now, to do this installation, we are going to need to raise up the rear suspension or the truck, and that way the suspension opens up for us, allowing us to get our springs in place. So I'm on obviously a lift, so I'll be using a trans jack on the hitch. If you're doing this at home and don't have a lift, you can just simply make sure you chalk the front tires. You can put a floor jack on your hitch. If you don't have a hitch, you can find a solid mount on the frame and just raise this up. And really all you're trying to do is open up that window for us to be able to get the old ones out and the new ones in. So to remove our factory jounce stops, we're going to make sure that we have a 10mm socket on a ratchet. You will probably need an extension here as well. And we're just going to kind of undo the bolt that bolts this into the frame rail. Pretty easy here. Now that we have this one off, we'll go ahead and take off the other side as well. Now you can see the difference between the factory jounce and our new Timbrens, and clearly it's going to engage a lot quicker. In fact, these live pretty close to the bump stops, so that way it's going to soften that, and as we add weight, it's just going to fight that much better. So it's going to install pretty much how these came out. Now there are two different options you can do here. There's this spacer, which is going to allow for quicker engagement and a little bit more preload. So that way, if you do have a lot of weight or tow a lot, I would recommend putting the spacer in. If you occasionally tow and occasionally have heavy stuff in the back, you can opt out of that. But honestly, putting this in place, you're still going to get a nice smooth ride. Now, if you are using the spacer, just make sure that you have the longer bolt, and the shorter one will obviously be if you're not using that. So we'll go ahead and feed this in. Now, you're going to see the open end here. As I drop this down, there is a washer. We obviously need to make sure that we thread our bolt through there. So just pass that through until it gets to the top. And we're going to be using a 17mm socket and an extension. It might get a little bit tight here, so if you have an extension that puts you kind of right at that edge, that's what you're going to be looking for, just to make it a little bit easier. We'll then put our spacer here, and then our plate, and then we're just going to go ahead, thread this in. Now if you want to, it's up to you. You can put a little bit of thread lock here. Now once you torque it down, it should stay in place. You really shouldn't have any issues, but if you want to, that's up to you. So again, we'll just go ahead. I have my extension down here. I'm just going to hand tighten it in before coming back with my ratchet. Now something that's a little helpful, I had a 6-inch extension, and that's going to work well, but the problem is once you have that in place, or even if you can get in place, it is tight to pull it out. So I recommend using 2 extensions, shorter ones here, and that way you can feed this one up, and it's going to make it a little bit easier to not only get this in place, but also to remove it later on. So we'll get this one slid on, make sure I'm on the head of the bolt. And then you can see now I can get my other small extension, and that's a swivel end, so it's a little bit easier, but now we can easily get in there and remove it once we have this tightened down. Now we'll come back to our torque wrench, and we'll torque this down to the instruction manual torque settings. Now, if you need a torque wrench, you can pick one up at eTrailer. You can generally go to an auto parts store and rent one for free. And that's just going to make sure that this is tightened down properly and not overly tightened on those threads. So go ahead and do that for both sides. So now with both sides torqued down properly, the installation is complete. So we can go ahead and lower down our vehicle, and I'm going to load it back up with weight and give it a test drive. And it is still squatting, which is kind of to be expected, but it's noticeably better, and that's because it's engaging on those a lot sooner than those factory jounce. So let's take it out and see how it handles. Oh man, already huge difference. I can barely tell there's weight in the back. The rear end just seems heavier duty. For a 1500, you know, they're great trucks, but with weight, you really start to notice their shortcomings as far as suspension. This is way better, way better. And steering feel, super confident. Like I said, I can see the tote of water kind of sloshing around in the back, but right now, I wouldn't know the difference if there was weight in here or not. Now let's go ahead, we'll do the slalom real quick, and that's going to kind of engage side to side. And that's another benefit too, is it's going to really reduce the amount of sway, again, because it's initiating. So kind of like a sway bar, it's going to want to fight against it to bring it back to center. And this is, yeah, night and day difference. This is really good. The ride quality too alone is We're allowing that suspension to work a little bit more because it has support, and it is a lot more comfortable. Again, it just feels like the truck can handle the weight no problem, whereas before it kind of did feel like that trailer was behind it and just kind of lugging behind. So definitely a huge improvement. And that was a look and installation of the Timbren Suspension Enhancement System for the rear axle on a 2022 Chevy Silverado 1500.